Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I decided to make another video. We're trying something new today. I'm filming on my phone for the first time ever because my G7X camera broke. It still works, but the flip up camera thing fell off. So it's a little annoying to use. So we're filming on my phone and we'll see what happens. Today's video is another installment in the series I want to call What the Subgenre? Which is just a little name I'm trying out. In this series, I'm talking to you guys about some of my favorite subgenres that you might never have heard of. Now, admittedly, today's subgenre you've probably heard of, but I wanted to do kind of a themed video because it is Women's History Month, and a couple days before filming this was International Women's Day. So the subgenre that we are going to be discussing today is Feminist Retellings. Oh my god. Not me wearing a Playboy sweater during my Feminist Retellings video. Hold on, I gotta change. You know what, that is one of my favorite sweaters and I probably could have continued wearing it without any actual issues, but you never know what people on the internet are gonna say, okay? Anyways, we're here today to talk about feminist retellings. This is a subgenre that I have enjoyed for a long time, as most people have, but I feel that it's an important one to talk about because it has become so massive and it has changed a number of times in ways that not everyone realizes, I think, and I don't know, I just want to talk about it today. A feminist retelling is pretty straightforward. You can just take the words feminist retelling and probably figure out for yourself what it is. But deep down in its roots, it means taking a story that already exists, either from mythology, classical literature, real history, or whatever, and then retelling it through a feminist lens. The reason this is important is because a lot of stories historically are told by men about men. And we especially see that in things like mythology and classical literature, and also in real historical examples because a lot of the heroes from history were men, apparently. Women didn't do anything interesting until like the 21st century. Just kidding. But it does feel that way sometimes. Today I'm going to be looking specifically at mythology retellings because that is mostly what I'm interested in and what I have in my collection. I'm going to do a couple of historical retellings, and we're not really going to be talking about any classical literature retellings, so you're not going to be seeing any Christina Henry on this list, like Alice or Horseman or Lost Boy or whatever. Those are great books, they just don't belong in this video. I also want to mention there's a difference between retellings and inspired by. Something that's inspired by history or mythology just means that we're taking a setting that exists in those worlds and adding new characters into them. Retellings are taking actual characters or historical figures and retelling their story from a new perspective. So in my opinion, feminist retellings really start in 2012 with Madeline Miller. I think you're probably like, but Margaret Atwood wrote the Penelope before that. She did, correct. But while I am talking about the subgenre as a whole, I also really want to focus on the trend that it has become. And the trend started with Madeline Miller. In 2012, Madeline released your favorite book ever, The Song of Achilles. This doesn't technically actually belong on this list because while it is a mythology retelling and it's a great book, it's not a feminist retelling because it focuses on the romantic relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, while gay as that is, not about women. But the massive popularity of The Song of Achilles really opened the door for Madeline Miller's 2018 release, Circe. And Circe is a true feminist retelling. If you haven't heard of Circe before, it's the story of the daughter of Helios, who is an outcast witch child, who, because of a betrayal involving the story of Prometheus, is sequestered, banished, exiled to her own island, and she is brought up a couple of times in real mythology through the story of Odysseus, but there's not much about her other than that she's a villain. So I would call Circe the first official entry in the feminist mythology retelling genre. Song of Achilles was super popular because we all know from childhood and Brad Pitt's movie Troy who Achilles is, but we didn't really know who Circe was. So once this gained popularity, it kind of allowed other authors to come forward with this new thing, this new cool thing, which is telling the stories of previously unheard of figures in mythology, Greek mythology. And when I tell you that Greek mythology just freaking exploded, I'm not kidding. Also, side note, who decided that orange and blue were the official colors of Greek mythology? I don't mind it, I'm just confused by it. Greek mythology retellings, I'm gonna put these down because there's too many. Greek mythology retellings are enormously popular. And I grew up on Greek mythology just like everyone else in the Western world did. I was watching movies based on Greek mythology, I was reading actual Greek mythology textbooks, I was reading Percy Jackson. Every university I attended, which is 5 by the way, had a Greek mythology elective. And that elective would fill up in the first minute that registration opened, and it was really annoying because I really wanted to take it because I too was very obsessed with Greek mythology. But, I'm not saying we're running out of lady figures from Greek mythology, but is that subgenre a little exhausted? Yes. I think that Greek mythology was so popular at first because of like what I said about the Song of Achilles. It's new, but it's extremely familiar. It's great to have all these Jennifer Saint books, even though the only one I had previously heard of was Electra, and that was because of Jennifer Garner. But Greek mythology is something comfortable. It's something we know, and it's something we feel safe reading. But gosh, I'm really glad we branched out. Something I kind of think about that's not a controversial take necessarily, but I do feel as much as Greek mythology should belong to the Greeks, it really does belong to the Western world now. Like, we took this and we made it ours. If I had to guess, all of these authors are white. I'll double check that later, but I'm 99% sure all of these authors are white, women. And as great as it is that we're telling feminist versions of these very old tales, let's do other things that aren't Greek. I wanted to talk now about how we diversified into other mythologies, but the next one that kind of became popular after Greek is Norse, which, like, again, is all white people. That's fine though, because at least it's something. Now, I only have Genevieve Gornichek's books, and then on my shelves, I didn't bring them out, but I have some Russian mythology as well, mostly retellings of Baba Yaga. And The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek is really the first Norse feminist retelling that became very popular. And again, it's the exact same thing where the story of Angrboda is relatively unknown, or completely unknown until, you know, God of War Ragnarok just came out, so maybe you know it now, it's a little different in the game. But this felt safe and familiar because she's the wife of Loki. She's Tom Hiddleston's wife. And this book came out around the same time that I think the Loki TV show season 1 was in pre-production, so I'm not saying they're related, but it definitely became a sort of parallel. We, the target audience, 20-something white girls, were freaking out about Loki, so a book about his wife, awesome. But Genevieve Gornichek really proved herself with this book. It's a phenomenal book. It's the only book that has ever made me cry a lot. So her next book, The Weaver and the Witch Queen, which is ancient Norway again, 10th century Norway, also became really popular. The main thing that these Norse tales, the Russian tales I've mentioned, and the Greek mythology tales have in common, other than being mythology retellings, is that we generally are looking at the stories of villainesses. So female figures in mythology tend to either be a wife, a sexy villain, an ugly villain, or a virgin girl who does nothing. So I think the reason these retellings are so popular is because authors, usually female authors, are looking at these stories and being like, hey, that girl who was mentioned one time in this thing, what's her story? So many translations and earlier retellings of these mythology tales are done by men through a more masculine hero's journey lens. So we don't get to learn the depth of a lot of these legends and lore. And I think one of the best and most popular examples is Medusa. I have 3 different Medusa retellings, and if you think you know Medusa, you probably know her as the lady with the snake hair, Uma Thurman in Percy Jackson. She turns men to stone if they meet her eyes. And yeah, that's true, but why is she like that? Well, let's find out from these 3 different retellings. Her story is actually very dark, very sad. I won't get into it now because I'll have to put a bunch of trigger warnings on the video, which I won't, but she had a rough time. Other figures, other gods and demigods in the Greek pantheon are not as nice as you maybe thought they were. One of the huge benefits of these mythology retellings is we get to learn more about the stories that we think we know already. And it's funny because all 3 of these are from post 2022. So it's like we got through all of the unknown figures and now it's safe to come back to the known figures and just do a bunch. Anyways, diversity. Once Greek and Norse retellings sort of, I don't want to say ran their course because they're still being written, but once they became popular and the audience, this hyper diverse audience, realized that we love retellings, more authors from different backgrounds were able to write their own religions and mythologies and country's lore into retellings, and I love that because I love to learn. I would argue that the most popular right now is Asian, whether it's East Asian, like we see right here, or West Asian with Kakai by Vaishnavi Patel. Asian is the new Greek. Don't take that out of context, okay? We're finally starting to see a lot more Asian and Middle Eastern and Indian and African retellings, which is really awesome. And feminist retellings, that's the point. There are retellings that already exist of a lot of myths, but they're still like really demonizing women in them. This is Neferura by Milena Evans. This is a historical retelling, so she is a real person. And it's great because you think we've got a lot of feminist Egyptian retellings, but they're all about Cleopatra. So it's good to see some more coming out that are a little more unique. We also have, not to undiversify, but one of the newest types of historical retellings that I think is very, very interesting is Christian retellings. Now, the reason this is more interesting than the others to me is because Christianity is so precious to the Western world that we don't call this a mythology retelling because you know why. So Hild by Nicola Griffith is more of a historical retelling because this is the story of Saint Hilda of Whitby, who was a real person. She's documented in history, but she's a major figure in early medieval Christianity. But this one, Jezebel by Megan Barnard, I'm not sure there's proof that Jezebel was a real person, so this was what we would call Christian mythology right here. I think it's so cool to see Christian mythology retellings coming out because it's like we're getting braver. And while a lot of these are also based on real religions, like especially Hindu ones and Islamic retellings, they are still placed into fantasy, which is something a coworker of mine pointed out, is like when we get the Greek retellings and Christian retellings specifically, they're put into general fiction, which would make them historical. But any other religion, including Norse, is put into fantasy. Do with that what you will. You might be thinking like, oh, well, we already have so much Christian retellings. What are you talking about? King Arthur exists. And yes, Arthurian stuff is technically Christian mythology, but it's not part of actual Christian religion. It's its own thing. This is more in the classical literature setting, which is why I'm not really going to be talking about Half Sick of Shadows or Morgan Is My Name or Spear, also by Nicola Griffith. Even though these are fantastic feminist Arthurian retellings and reimaginings, they're not really like the topic of the video. If I were to criticize the feminist retelling subgenre in any way, it would be one, we need to keep diversifying. There's so much Greek. I'm done with Greek. I know some people still love it and it's still popular and that's why it's still being written. And it's great. No subgenre should ever die. But I want to see more historical retellings from different cultural and ethnic settings, and I want to see more retellings of mythologies and religions in the way that we're seeing Christianity right now. My other criticism is that sometimes, I'm not going to point out any books specifically, but sometimes something is considered a feminist retelling because the main character is a woman, but the story itself is not feminist. And that's more of just like a marketing issue, I guess, or like a reader audience issue, but we need to remember that feminism has a definition and it's not just woman. So yeah, that's everything I really have to say about the subgenre of feminist retellings. It is a subgenre that I truly enjoy. It's one of the only genres outside of fantasy and sci-fi and horror that I actually read. Like, it's the only time you're gonna find me reading historical fiction is if it's a retelling of true events, or at least known mythological events. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other mythology retellings or historical retellings that you want me to check out or talk about in one of my later videos. Let me know if this is a subgenre that you read a lot. I have a lot more videos planned for the what the subgenre? I don't know why I chose that name. It doesn't mean anything. But I have a lot more videos planned for this series, so let me know down below as well if there's any subgenres you want me to deep dive into, and I'll see if I can. Before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 2 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye.